Four FICO scoring company managers with decades of experience gave credit hacks on raising your credit scores and shared secrets about how the FICO scoring model really works. You've probably seen your credit score behave in really strange ways and seen dips in your credit score even when you're focused, paying on time, and doing everything by the book. These insiders are pulling back the curtain to show you how your credit scores are calculated and why sometimes things just don't make sense. You'll see why paying off an installment loan or reporting a zero balance on credit cards makes you look more risky to lenders. Crazy, right? And why having one 30-day late payment hurts people with excellent credit a lot more than people with poor credit. The four FICO company professionals include Elizabeth Warren, Senior Product Manager, Tom Quinn, Vice President of Scores, Tommy Lee, Director of Analytics Science, and Paul Panicelli, Principal Scientist. Let's start with the questions about credit score impact and management. The first question is, why are we penalized for not carrying debt? They said the FICO score measures how well you manage your debt. If you don't have any debt, the algorithm doesn't have any data about how well you manage your debt. Think of it like being a fast runner. You may be a very fast runner, but if you've never run any races, it would be hard for anyone else to know that you are a fast runner. Next, can you say anything about the algorithms that determine the score impact of a Chapter 7 bankruptcy over time, say 1 year, 2 years, 18 months, 3 years, etc., until 10 years when it falls off? Often in adverse action letters, the language uses recent to describe a derogatory account/record. For example, you have a recent bankruptcy. I never know what that means exactly. So I like to know more about what recent means and how the impact of my bankruptcy Chapter 7 influences scores over time so that I can plan future credit card applications, eventually property acquisition, and other important financial decisions. They say the posting of a bankruptcy on a credit report is considered negative by a FICO score as the bankruptcy information ages and one's newly reported credit behavior is positive. Its impact on the score will lessen over time. The more recent the posting of the bankruptcy, the greater the negative impact on the score. Next up, with all other things being equal, is a person with $40,000 of debt and 30% aggregate utilization. In other words, does the dollar amount of debt as opposed to the percentage utilization impact the FICO score in any way? This is not well understood, but many of us here would love an answer to this. And they said within FICO scores, there are characteristics that look at balances and at utilization ratios. Generally speaking, the data shows that utilization information is more predictive of future risk versus balance information, and therefore it weighs more heavily in the score. And another question is, which has a greater weight? Charge-offs with a balance or collections with a balance? Basically, what should be paid first for the most improvement? And they said charge-offs and collections are both considered as negative items by the FICO score. The extent to which these impact your score can vary based on credit profile. Starting with FICO score 9, paid collections are not factored into the score, whereas paid charge-offs are still factored into the score. Next, is there anything you are able to say about the accuracy/predictiveness of the FICO score? For example, for every X point reduction in score below a threshold, issuers experience defaults within 2 years at a Y percentage. And is each new version an attempt to improve on this, or are there other metrics issuers look at in evaluating whether to buy the scores? And they answer by saying the relationship between FICO score and subsequent defaults is not fixed, but varies over time depending on a variety of factors, including the economic environment. Newer FICO scores aim to improve predictiveness over previous versions. Predictiveness is a key reason for why a lender would use a credit score. Now, let's talk about the specifics of credit scoring. The next question is, can you clarify whether a closed revolving credit account reporting both a balance and a credit limit are indeed essentially treated the same as open revolving accounts until they reach a $0 balance for the purpose of both individual account and aggregate revolving utilization, particularly for FICO 8? And can you confirm whether revolving HELOC accounts and revolving credit card accounts with very large reported limits, say $100,000 plus, are weighted the same as smaller revolving accounts individually? Like, does a $150,000 balance on a $200,000 HELOC carry the same weight as a $15,000 balance on a $20,000 limit credit card? Or whether they are weighted the same or even factored in at all for aggregate revolving utilization, particularly with FICO 8. And they answer by saying if an account is marked as closed but still has a balance reported, that balance information may be considered in balance utilization characteristics within the score. Now, for older score versions, HELOC accounts may be considered in the score, including in several balance and utilization related characteristics. For newer score versions, HELOC accounts may not factor into balance and utilization. Next up, does a paid charged off account affect you negatively for the entire 7 years that it's on your reports? Or does the effect lessen over time like a 30 or 60-day late does? And they said a paid charge-off account can impact your FICO score while it's on your credit report, but its impact will lessen over time. Moving on, if I have 10 cards with a total credit line of $100,000 and I carry $8,000 of debt all on one card that has a credit limit of $8,500, why does my score suffer so much? Whereas if I spread that $8,000 of debt evenly on my 10 cards, my score does not take such a hit. I would think spreading it over 10 cards is more risky if you add up the minimum payments of all 10 cards versus the minimum payment on one card. The monthly commitment would be higher spread over 10 cards. And they said the FICO score considers both overall revolving utilization and the highest utilization on a revolving account. The weight given to each of these factors is based on historical data from millions of credit files, which indicates that both of these factors are predictive of future payment behavior. And they asked, why are the penalties so different between credit bureaus if the negative marks are the same for the different ones? For example, Equifax may give negative 10 points for high use, while high use on Experian will give negative 5 or plus 5, etc. Why do they affect differently for the same issues? And they said, while the design blueprint of the FICO scores is consistent across the credit bureaus, each model is optimized for the credit bureau data on which it was developed, which may result in different point assessments for similar data elements reported across the three bureaus. Next, they asked, why do one's FICO 8 scores drop when all revolving accounts report a zero balance? And why does it drop when your only open installment loan is paid off? Now, they said the data shows that 0% utilization is slightly riskier than having a low utilization. Having low utilization is an indication that you have credit and are using it responsibly. Moving on to the next question, why do mortgages still use very old FICO 2, 3, and 5 models? Which carries more weight, utilization of specific credit cards or overall utilization across all cards? And finally, is utilization factored into scores by the range it falls into, where any utilization in a certain range, say 20 to 29%, results in the same score? Or is it more linear where, for example, 26% utilization might result in a higher score than 27%? And here's where they said the versions commonly used in mortgage lending are FICO Score 5 at Equifax, FICO Score 2 at Experian, and FICO Score 4 at TransUnion. In mortgage lending, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and the FHFA determine the credit criteria and score versions used for most mortgage loan decisions. The models look at revolving utilization in several different ways, which are all predictive of future credit risk. Generally speaking, the characteristic values are classed and the ranges are intervals for point assessment. Now, I just want to tell you the best way to improve your credit utilization when you have a small business is by moving all business spending from your personal credit cards onto your business credit cards. It helped me improve my FICO score by at least 30 points because once those balances started reporting on the business side, they had no effect on my personal side with my utilization rate. There's a business card that takes it a step further and requires no hard credit check at all to get approved. No personal guarantee, so you're not on the hook personally for any debt, and never reports your usage to the personal credit bureaus. And that's the Bill Divvy card. You get automated credit decisions up to $400,000, 7x points on dining purchases, and they approved me for a $2,000 starting limit based on my business revenue. So definitely check that out and click the link below to fund your business without worrying about any hard credit pulls. So let's talk about the questions relating to credit score calculations and impact factors. They asked, why does even just a single 30-day late payment that happened perhaps many years ago have such a detrimental effect on one's score even after they've displayed perfect payment history in the years since? For example, it's fairly easy for someone with 10 years of credit history and no lates to have scores in the 800s. Whereas if the same person has a single 30-day late from 5 years ago, their score might be 75 points lower. While I understand that a very recent late payment is a red flag that the person might be getting into credit trouble, I would think that after a few months of perfect payments, after that, the late payment should have little or no effect on the score anymore. And yet it seems to affect scores by 50 to 100 points or even more for many years afterwards, long after the red flags were proven to be a false alarm, until it eventually falls off the report or the person begs and pleads with the creditor to have it removed. I also understand that as time goes on, their effect on your score is gradually reduced some, but they never stop having a major effect until they're gone. Also, why is the effect of an old 30-day late so much more drastic against people with higher scores? For example, a single 30-day late from 5 years ago might have almost no effect on someone with a 650 score, but it could be taking 75 points off someone's score who would otherwise have an 850 without it. Now, here's what they said. The weight given to missed payments is based on historical data from millions of credit files, which indicates that those with missed payments are riskier than those who don't have missed payments. The impact of a missed payment will lessen over time. Additionally, the impact to FICO score of a missed payment is highly dependent on the starting credit profile of the consumer. A FICO score measures credit risk based on a credit file at a single point in time. So when considering why a score changed from a missed payment, it's helpful to consider what the credit file looked like before and after the missed payment. If the credit file indicates significantly greater or lesser credit risk than before, then a FICO score will change more than if the credit risk is similar before and after the missed payment. Here's where someone asks, what I'm curious about is why isn't on-time payment percentage calculated and included? As others have mentioned, FICO is all or nothing. Either you're perfect or you're mediocre at best. How is it someone can be penalized for around 80 or so points for being late one time out of 2,000 payments? That's a 99.9% positive payment history. And this was interesting. They said the weight given to missed payments is based on historical data from millions of credit files, which indicates that those with missed payments are riskier than those who don't have missed payments. FICO scores reward consumers who have a higher percentage of accounts with no delinquencies, more accounts currently paid as agreed, and those who have a longer credit history. Next up, what are the minimum requirements for obtaining a thick file classification? Are closed accounts included? They said there is no single definition of thick file in the industry. Lenders, scoring companies, the credit bureaus may define it differently. Next, is there a certain range of amount owed on revolving accounts or amount owed on accounts where balances affect utilization calculations more than the percentage? And they said, generally speaking, revolving utilization tends to have more impact to FICO scores than revolving balances, regardless of balance amount. And here they ask, FICO has previously released some guidelines about what makes up scores. 35% payment history, 30% utilization, 15% credit age, 10% inquiries and new accounts, and 10% credit mix. My question is, are these percentages fixed? Or is it just a rough guideline that actually can vary? And if so, by how much can they vary? Here they said, these percentages provide consumers with an estimation of how much each category contributes to the overall score calculation. These percentages can vary for various subsegments, such as those with thin files. Moving on, when a credit card is in good standing and being closed, does it make a difference whether the account was closed by the grantor or by the consumer? I know there's no scoring impact, but many people here believe a lender may be slightly less likely to lend to a consumer if there are notes throughout the consumer's profile of credit card accounts always being closed by the grantor. And they answer by saying the FICO score does not differentiate based on how a closed status is reported. It can say closed, closed by consumer, closed by grantor, and it does not consider a closed status as a negative item. Next question is, will balance/utilization trends still affect the score negatively even if the current balance/utilization is much lower than usual? The FICO professional said, with FICO score 10T, the score will evaluate both the current balance and current utilization information being reported, as well as historical balance and historical utilization information to generate the score. Next question. Years ago, there was talk of a super sweet ratio point for ultimate FICO scoring, and that was 1-to-1, 2-to-2, 3-to-3, etc. Basically, the amount of open revolving cards and open reporting installment loans were exactly the same. Any truth to that? And what is the exact number of inquiries that FICO stops counting them into your current score? 12, 20, 80, sky's the limit? And if inquiries quit counting into your score after 1 year and FICO doesn't see them anymore, then why do they need to stay on your report for 2 years? Also, why am I penalized for not having a mortgage? And they said inquiries stay on your credit bureau report for 2 years. The credit bureaus determine this, while FICO scores only consider inquiries in the past year. There is no characteristic in FICO scores that penalize a user for not having a mortgage loan. Next question is, why can your FICO 8 score go up and at the same time your FICO 9 scores go down? Here's what they said. While both FICO score versions have a very similar design blueprint, FICO score 8 and FICO score 9 are unique and independent scoring systems. As such, one version could increase while the other version decreases when there is a change in the underlying bureau data. Moving on, we often hear the words, but this effect of your prior indiscretion will decrease over time. When it comes to 30 lates, 60 lates, etc. Can you speak to any gradual increase in terms of points? Most users report they change and get a jump only after the full 7 years, despite the effect language. And they said, all else being held equal, as delinquencies age and no new delinquencies are added, consumers will generally see the impact to their score gradually decrease over time, not just a jump after a full 7 years. Next, if after 12 months, there is no longer a hit to one's credit score, then why does an inquiry stay on a credit report for 2 years and not one? And can there not be two different inquiries, one for applying for new credit? And can there be a new inquiry coding for employment, bank accounts, etc., that are not credit related? Now, here's what they said. Inquiries can stay on your credit bureau report for 2 years. The credit bureaus determine this, while FICO scores only consider inquiries in the past year. Generally speaking, inquiries don't drive the score, and the additional permutations listed would likely have little impact on more accurately predicting future credit risk. The bureaus currently have various types of inquiries that are identified as non-credit related: unemployment screens, insurance renewal, etc. These non-credit related inquiries are not considered in a FICO score calculation. And guys, before I forget, if you're tired of wasting hard credit pulls for credit cards that give you super low starting limits, then you gotta check out this list of 9 credit cards that guarantee your starting limit before approval. It's the only way to know for sure that you're getting the limit you want and not a lowball offer. Just click the link below to download it for free. All right, let's talk about all the questions related to inquiries and credit mix. They said, what are the segmentation factors among the 4 dirty scorecards in FICO 8? Also, what would an ideal or maximal profile look like with regards to credit mix in FICO 8? What would distinguish a profile that was very good from one that was exceptional in this regard? The algorithm appears to want more than just having an installment and a few revolvers. And they said the segmentation for files with negative information at the time of scoring is based on different degrees of negative information in the consumer's credit report. Generally speaking, having a mix of open installment loans and open revolving accounts results in a higher credit mix rating. Next, let's talk about algorithmic decisions and updates. Like, how many is too many? Is it a percentage of accounts, or is it a raw number? Are only open accounts factored in, or are closed accounts included as well? What is an ideal account reporting a balance for just credit cards? What is ideal for all accounts? And they said, for one, opening just one new account in a recent time period can impact someone's score. Even a recent opening of just one new account is indicative of higher risk compared to someone who hasn't opened any new accounts. Consumers with less credit history are more likely to be impacted by just one, whereas consumers with a longer credit history may not be. Both the number and percent of accounts with balances can be factors in FICO score calculation. In some cases, consumers with less credit history and are fewer accounts, even 1 or 2 accounts with balances, may be too many. Next, my understanding has been that the FICO algorithm is derived from big data, so while things might not apparently make sense, the correlation is there, and that's all the lenders need to know. I thought that this might be why, for example, AZO can improve scores, or all 0 except for 1. It's not obvious that having exactly one card showing a balance should indicate better creditworthiness, but data might show that. So in theory, if data mining showed that spending between $50 and $75 in an electronics store in March was highly correlated to a default within 6 months, a newer version of the algorithm might severely penalize such a purchase. Secondly, your data mining understanding of the model is incorrect, at least for the FICO score. It is correct that the factors considered by the FICO score are determined based on observed correlations with credit risk. The FICO score algorithm is based on a scorecard system that emphasizes explainability and transparency. In contrast, machine learning only models can have predictive factors that are harder to identify. Also, machine learning only models may pick up predictive factors that are unfair to consumers. Next, what determines whether an installment loan will code as a consumer finance account, and do all installment loans from that financial institution get marked as a consumer finance account? This is something that really confuses everyone because the reason code doesn't appear until you don't have any serious reason codes left. They answer by saying the credit bureaus assign the coding that is used for identifying these types of loans. Moving on, is there any internal scoring difference between having loans or credit cards from a conventional bank, let's say Chase, US Bank, Citi, etc., versus having similar products from a credit union in any FICO models? Also, how is utilization scored on a charge card like the Amex Gold and Platinum in regards to using a pay over time feature on FICO 10T? They said in general, there should not be a difference in most versions of the FICO scores. This depends on how it was reported. However, open-ended accounts are not included in utilization characteristics. Why does a negative event such as a late payment drop a FICO score immediately, but a positive event such as paying off a loan doesn't immediately raise the score? They said, first, note that a negative event doesn't necessarily drop a FICO score immediately. For example, if the FICO score is already low. Also, negative history is the most important predictor of future risks. So a new negative event has a large impact on the FICO score. An analogy might be helpful here. Like building a reputation, a good reputation gets built over time, but a reputation can be damaged quickly with one misjudgment. Also note that a FICO score measures credit risk based on a credit file at a single point in time. So when considering why a score changed from a missed payment, it's helpful to consider what the credit file looked like before and after the missed payment. If the credit file indicates significantly greater or lesser credit risk than before, then a FICO score will change more than if the credit risk is similar before and after the missed payment. Now, in version 8, there is a scoring penalty when all cards on which a consumer is an authorized user report a zero balance. Is that intentional or a bug? Do you have the ability to fix bugs after a scoring model, for example, FICO 8 is released, or is everybody stuck with it until you release and lenders adopt a new scoring model, for example, FICO 9 and 10? Here's what they said. Analysis on millions of credit files indicates that there is more risk associated with those with zero balances than those with small balances. Having low utilization is an indication that you have credit and are using it responsibly. So the FICO score considers consumers with a small balance more favorably than those with zero balance. Also, we can fix bugs to a score after it's released. Following that, how accurate/reliable are the free FICO scores that are offered by many credit cards, such as Chase Credit, Journey, and Discover FICO Credit Scorecard? Are they even close to the real scores if I were to request them from the bureaus? They said if the score is labeled as a FICO score, it is a valid FICO score. If not, it's likely not a FICO score. Many lenders provide their customers with access to their FICO scores for free within the online statement. You'll want to understand a couple items looking at your credit score from a bank. 1, make sure you're looking at a FICO score. If it doesn't say FICO score, it's likely not a FICO score. 2, make a note of the score version, the bureau, and the date the score was generated. There are different FICO score versions, and your score can vary based on bureau and the date it was pulled. Your FICO scores can be different if sourced from different bureaus, pulled on different dates, or different versions. Now, if you want to improve your FICO scores, you'll want high credit limit trade lines reporting quickly to multiple credit bureaus. There's 4 trade lines that will give you up to a $30,000 credit limit instantly, even if you have no credit, or worse, a bankruptcy or late payments on your credit report. One of them even reports within 7 days of opening the account. So hit the next video to see how you can instantly get approved for these 4 trade lines. Thank you for watching.